In all the years that I've covered the countryside, my mind always goes back to the first few months where I saw, 90% of the time I saw women working. And they did back-breaking jobs, but to do back-breaking jobs, you've got to have a very erect spine to be able to take that. This first panel in bricks, coal and stone, you can see that. Overall temperature in the brick kiln, 49 degrees Celsius. In the furnace, it went up to 3-4 degrees. In those kind of temperatures, you're having these men and women walk barefoot. That sand below clings to your feet with the heat, right? Even if you're wearing chappals, it gets under. They are barefoot because they can't get a grip on those ramps with chappals and things like that. And some of them just don't have chappals. They couldn't afford it. They're also carrying very heavy bricks on their head, and after they're fired, they'll carry those bricks out again on their head or on their shoulders, and those bricks will still be hot. When you work in here, all kinds of fine dust, brick dust, all different kinds of dust get into your nostrils and your face and everything else. All these pictures were shot before the advent of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. However, even now you'll find 14-year-olds and younger ones trying to look older than they are so that they can get work. So you'll get 12 and 13-year-old girls wearing full saris and coming to the work site in the hope of getting, otherwise the officer will turn them away because they're too young. When you do open cast mining, you dig up tons of topsoil, because the coal seams are usually 25 to 30 meters below. So you end up creating giant mountains of waste soil. The mountains that it creates, they have 3% to 5% coal, meaning they are going through that mountains of waste in order to pick up little pieces of coal. But there's so much hard work involved that they all produce 200 kgs, 300 kgs. Okay? Now, they are leaving very suddenly and very fast because you see that the skies are about to burst. This is the monsoon. Later, the heavy rains of the monsoon will wipe out the paths. So they need to get out. This area will become like quicksand or bog. Okay, you can actually sink in it. This is the first of 3 panels related to land. I call it a lifetime bending because that was the first thing that struck me in all the women I saw working. They were always bending. They were always bending. So I made a panel just of that because how much of the work is done by women bending over, doubling over, and you do not see men do that much of that kind of work. They do very hard work sometimes, but not a patch on the amount of work and the quantum of work and the nature of work that women do. Now, here, this is in Bodatanapalli in Vizianagaram district of Andhra Pradesh. She is the part owner of a little plot. They're trying to grow cashew. When she wants to take a break, she doesn't even bother to stand up. She's just resting on the implement because she's breathing 30 seconds, 40 seconds. That is her break. And then she'll go back to work and it's 40 degrees. She looks like a bird, no? Yeah. All these pictures have gone back to the villages where I shot them. And here's an interesting thing. When I ask women, which is your favorite photograph, pick me a favorite photograph from this exhibition. Women of your class background pick this picture. This is what most people of our class background like. They think it's a great image. The women who actually do this work do not think much of that image. But women of her class background, they pick this picture. If you look at this picture, what does it show you? It shows you that all the women are bending over and working and the men are just standing around.
Okay.
So they say that that picture is the truth. Huh? So this picture they identify with. Can you guess what these girls are picking up? Red hairy caterpillars, RHCs. You know why they're picking them up? Because the landowners have offered 10 rupees per kg. So you have to collect about 1200 to 1300 in order to get 10 rupees. But they're collecting them. And then your hands get all kinds of little itchy problems because you're handling pests. And you're handling pests that have been sprayed with pesticide. If you notice very carefully, there are actually 3 girls. So these girls are drinking in that pesticide, they're handling pesticide, not once, not twice, but 1200, 1300 times each time you pick up one of these and put it into the bucket. The morning I was there, they collected about 4 buckets. This is from Jabua in Madhya Pradesh. Look at the quality of the land, the stones, and it's very stony and very, it doesn't look great land yet. They will not let you remove the stones from the soil. This is on a river bank, okay? It's sloping into the river. And they say that the stones bind the soil, okay? So you don't remove them. The runoff will be greater if there were no stones. This is my favorite photograph in many, many ways. You know what I call this? I call this the India photograph. There's a reason. When I was looking through the lens, what struck me was this. The man, the landowner, is alone and upright. The women are doubled over. That's 1 followed by 9 zeros. That's 1 billion. That's India. 10% of the men are owners, and the women are mostly laborers. Of course, there are women in the owners as well, but in the world of work, that's about it. 1 followed by 9 zeros, and the population had just crossed 1 billion, or was just fast approaching 1 billion when I shot that photograph. I actually cheated the landlord a bit and told him come and stand in the photograph and everything else, because he was getting more and more alarmed at my being around talking to the women. At that time there was no NREGA, but there was an EGS and food for work sites. See what happened, we went out to photograph the women at work. So we were there at 7:30. First surprise for those who were with me is that the women who came out to start work at 7:30 had already been working 3 hours at home. Okay? Cooking, cleaning, swabbing, sending off the children to school, whatever, getting them ready. That all these women had already worked 3 hours that morning, as they do every morning of their lives. But it made a beautiful shot coming through those palm trees like that. And they always move in that single file, which makes it so picturesque. Yeah, it makes that very picturesque. And in Odisha, when they start the seeding and it starts raining, you'll find people wearing either a very beautiful kind of rain hat or simply continuing to work with umbrellas. So these were all the mud works and pre-cultivation work or food for work programs or whatever that they were doing, keeping their labor employed and engaged. This is the picture from which the title came. Visible work, invisible women. Visible work, invisible women. Look, she's coming up a cliff. Her child is still half concealed because they're coming up from the river. It's a steep 60% incline. The stuff she's carrying on her head is greater in volume than her own body. She's also managing to carry a little, not a little, a big tiffin carrier. But what it does, it blocks out peripheral vision completely. So you can get easily hit from the side if something falls, or if you're on the road and a car comes by. Your peripheral vision is completely blocked because that is covering your head. Now what she's done is, see what they do in these villages, they have these large dug wells, quite deep, dug wells, to keep the dust away, the mud away, because these wells don't have walls in that sense, and you have very heavy winds and hot winds sometimes during the summer. So they cover them with logs. The logs are not tied. There is nothing to hold those logs except their own weight and balance. I spent the whole morning and then the whole afternoon watching these young women walk out onto the logs, throw a bucket through the hole, pick up the water and walk off. Then I thought, I'm also going to try this. So I went there. Each time I got onto the logs would rock. I was much heavier than them. I was twice their weight. And then that woman would stand there looking irritated, waiting when this, ridiculous farce is going to get over. Because if you fall, you take a straight drop of 30 feet, maybe more, who knows, and then the logs come in on you. Right? How the hell do they do that day after day of their lives? They just walk out onto the logs, put the bucket, take the water, and you see the length of the rope, how deep it's got to go. She's a Bonda Adivasi, a very rare tribe, now down to maybe 2,000-3,000 people. What she's doing is she's carrying about 35 kilograms of firewood on her head and walking slightly uphill. Just try it. I did. I took it from her and put it on my head, and my neck just disappeared under the weight of that. It just pressed down and I couldn't breathe. It was suffocating. After quite a short distance, I returned it to her, and she just glided off with it without any problem. This is about those who live off produce of the forest and of various other little things that they do. The colonial powers considered forests only as a source of timber and game for their hunting. But millions of people in the world live off the non-timber produce of the forest, whether it's in berries or fruit or herbs, medicinal plants, whatever, they need that. It's 5:30 in the morning or so. This is Project Tiger area. They're all out in the fields picking tendu leaves for bidi. This is the tendu leaf. That is the best earning season for the poor in those regions. In those 3 months or some weeks, they will make more money than they do from their other jobs in 6 months. So they're all out as family units collecting it. And I just thought it looked so incredibly graceful. The way she would pick the thing and throw it into her arm, It was just astonishing. She never seemed to drop any. For me, even the cutting or the picking was so difficult. And that wrist action, I think you'll be exhausted and your back will be strained by the end of the day, but they do it every day like that. At home, her younger sister is tying the leaves into kattas, so many, into bunches of 25 or 50 or 100 or whatever the requirement is. She's bringing home berries from the forest, each is in a different region. There they are taking the stuff that you take from the forest to make brooms, jadus, right? And she is an artist. She's an artisan. She is a pan and pot repairer. Okay, she is a technologist. Yeah. Well, her technology more directly affects more people every day. She repairs pots and pans and things like that. And she's a very skilled, highly skilled person at it. Now, when you collect your produce, you go to market, you need to sell, okay? Apart from what you consume. Look at the different ways in which people show up at the markets. This is in Godda in the Santal Paraganas. To go anywhere, you're walking 15, 20 kilometers. To go visit your friend, you're walking 15, 20 kilometers up and down hill. This is at the local heart in a village in Godda, in a hilly village in Godda. Those huge bamboos you see have been brought there by these women on their heads, like that. They've walked 20, 30 kilometers. Look, what is the average height of these women is 4 feet something, 4.5 feet, under 5 feet. Look at the bamboos. Those bamboos may not look terribly heavy to you. Take my word for it, they're back-breakingly heavy. These women have brought those on their heads. They have walked across hills and valleys to reach the heart. That is the local rural market, the weekly market. That woman in Odisha, she's a tribal who's brought her produce and is waiting with some discontent and irritation because the merchant has not shown up. She can't sell her produce until the merchant says so because he is her money lender. He's got what you call the right of first refusal over her produce. So you bring your produce. I take as much of it as I want, or if I don't want that day, I'll say, no, you can go. But if you're selling it to me, you have to sell it at a predetermined low price. I just love this picture because everybody was in height order also. And everybody was carrying as much as about the same size as their bodies. Right down to the last little girl, who's carrying a greater height than her body. All those are Adivasis coming down from the hills on market day. The same lady is sitting there. So one of the very complex and difficult jobs. She is stirring molasses. Her husband is what is called a Pannayeri Nadar, a Nadar group, Nadar caste, which means palm tree climbing Nadars. Okay, they climb the thing, they tap for toddy or they tap for molasses. Her husband climbs 3 times the height of the Empire State Building every day of his life to service 50 trees, during the season. Then those molasses have to be cooked and stirred, and that's quite a delicate business in itself, and that's what she does in the work hut. For me, there is a great significance to this picture. That is an Andhra woman, that's a woman in Andhra Pradesh, a Dalit. Just notice that she's wearing salwar kameez and she's making her own fashion statement of her independence. Okay? It's not usual. It's not common. This is a village, right? It's not the city. That's a Dalit woman in Andhra Pradesh. This picture for me always simply meant, I took this picture because though there is no human being visible in it, you can only associate it, if you had to think of a person there, you can only associate it with a woman. You can't picture a man hanging around this. It has to be a woman. So, yeah. This is, of course, the hand pounding of the rice, and that's collection by the way of fuel for taking back home. That's going to be the fuel at night. This is in Bihar, a woman collecting roots, geti, from the forest, because the geti is what they're going to live on in the lean months of drought when there's nothing else. Those are nutritious roots and tubers and stuff that they get out of the forest on which they're able to do things. I call this picture as about mothers. The lady is pregnant, this lady. She's tending to the cow, she's milking the cow. The cow is looking after its calf. It's about mothers, right? This is one of my favorite scenes, always in that particular village. Notice that the woman who is tending the buffalo, she is bringing back the buffalo from grazing. Look at her body language, firm, upright, confident, no fear. The buffalo is getting increasingly agitated. It's pawing the ground because it sees one little aggressor here waiting for it. The dog. Every day they go through this charade. As she brings the buffalo through that path, the dog is waiting to harass the buffalo. Then, as they come closer, the dog will start barking, the buffalo starts getting agitated and pawing the ground. The woman will pick up an imaginary stone and throw it at the dog. The dog will yelp as if he's been hurt, which he's not. And next day they will all go through the same scene again. Okay, it's like everybody feels this is mandatory, I have to do it. This, very honestly, I took this picture first and foremost, I took this picture because that nose ring was so beautiful. Isn't her nose ring beautiful? Yeah. That was the first thing. But then, when I thought, what a beautiful nose ring. And there's silver hair, white dress, silver hair, silver jadu, and silver nose ring. And then I noticed that the way she was bent and cleaning, it's like she's holding up the roof on her back. Like she's taking the weight of the roof. Figuratively, she does actually take the weight of the roof of her home. Here it looked almost literal. This is the weakest, most defenseless category of citizens in India. This is a Dalit woman in Rajasthan. Her name is Patasi Bai. She's carrying human excreta on her head. The so-called manual scavengers are all mostly women. Just like we say man days, but most of the work is done by women. This Patasi Bai will get, for cleaning up the shit in people's homes, in dry latrines, in those days, between 98 and 2000, she would get 1 roti a day per household and 5 rupees a month per household, whose latrines she was keeping clean. And it's a demeaning, humiliating, dignity-breaking imposition that the caste system and our caste societies make on human beings. But there's maybe there's more than 1 million Patasi Bais in the country who actually do this work. When I ask women of these photographs, the women in these photographs, which is your favorite photograph, they will all choose this one. It's sheer joy. The rest of the stuff, they've been there, they've done that. Right? This is joy. This is a cycling training camp in Pudukkottai, Tamil Nadu during the literacy movement. 180,000 women came to the camps and learned how to cycle in a very short period of time. And the literacy movement became successful because of the cycling movement. It gave women a tremendous sense of freedom. You'll find the story in my book. It's called Where There Is a Wheel. It's in the book Everybody Loves a Good Drought. Now look at all of them have dressed up in their very best saris to come and learn cycling. Okay? That lady is wearing her very best sari. And look at the activist. She's wearing a beautiful sari. Huh? Yeah, this is one of the greatest activists of South Tamil Nadu, Kannammal. She's one of the great literacy activists, one of the great union organizers. See, the woman who used to, say, carry small produce, most of them are small producers. You're carrying small produce to the market. You need brother, father, husband, or son to come and help you load it on top of the bus, right? Or to come and unload it when you've come from somewhere. None of that is now required. You put the baby in the front, you put the produce at the back, and you zip off on your cycle. You're able to cover more markets in a day than the single one that you used to go to because you're mobile. So cycling actually made a gigantic economic difference to these families, to these women, but it also meant much more to them personally than economically, that sense of being free and liberated. Taking the literacy mission to the quarry workers of Pudukkottai. This is a cave. It's a cave inside a quarry where those women who are granite stone breakers, you saw one of them, 14 years old. They are learning to read and write, and that girl is reading out what is a special supplement brought out by a newspaper for neoliterates. Look what a young girl is reading it. She's also around 14, 15. Kannamal is the literacy activist. All those women will recite, learn, sing songs, read poetry, and all of them are literate now. That was the first elected full women's panchayat in the country. Rama Panchayat in Madhya Pradesh, Jabua. But the reason why it was the first full women's panchayat was not particularly progressive or endearing. Because of the new, that time, 93, 94, with the coming of the Panchayati Raj Acts and the 73rd, 74th Amendment, there were reservations for women, there were reservations for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and across that. When the election was held, it would have meant that there would have been a majority of women in the panchayat anyway. The men in the village didn't like that. They didn't like the humiliation in their eyes of sitting down in a panchayat where the women were the majority and the dominant majority. So what did the men do? They stepped out and sent their wives in their place, and it became an all-woman panchayat. So that's how the first all-woman panchayat came, because the male ego would not allow them to sit there in a minority amongst the women of the village. There's a reason why I sign off with this photograph. There's a lesson for me, a memory for me, which I never take a picture without the consent of that person, whether it's a woman or a man. This is the one exception. I was sitting in her family's home in Malkangiri, in the Koraput region. She had gone out to, I think, she had been working most of the day, and she had gone out to wash those dishes at the hand pump. I didn't know that. I walked into her home, into the compound of her home, and I was sitting with her parents and others, and we were chatting. Then this little thing came home and enters her home to find a stranger with cameras, tape recorders, light stands, tripods, all sorts of things hanging about him. Right? She's very tired. She's very, very tired. But she's also fascinated by, who's this in my house? Right? And she's so tired, she falls asleep standing. At that point, I couldn't resist it. I clicked the photograph. When I clicked the photograph, her parents, her brother, others in the house, they all laughed loudly. She knew that something had happened, that somebody had done something at her expense, yeah, and she knew I was the villain. So she gave me such a look, a real put down. Look at the anger, the eyes on the verge of tears. So I photographed her when she was falling asleep standing. She did not know what had happened. She did not know who had done what. But she knew that everybody was laughing at her expense and that I was the guy responsible. So I got that look. I have never got such a look of anger from such a tiny creature ever. Right? So this is the full stop to it's someone becoming conscious of their rights and their dignity. It's the full stop to the exhibition.